Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Batman Hush, the latest DC animated movie? Stick around and find out. All right. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Batman Hush, the latest DC animated movie. The synopsis on IMDb reads, Batman Hush is a thrilling mystery of action, intrigue, and deception, based on the New York Times bestseller of the same name, penned by Jeff Loeb of Batman The Long Halloween, recently featured on my Essential Issues series at youtube.com/christiangeekcentral, and illustrated by... They didn't put that in the IMDb thing. I did. I just put that in there. Illustrated by comic superstar Jim Lee of All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder. Batman sets out to discover the identity of a mysterious mastermind using the Joker, Riddler, Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, I can't remember how they pronounced it in this one, and the Dark Knight's other enemies and allies as pawns in a plan to wreak havoc. All right, well, let's talk about the story, the script, pacing, just the general vibe of this thing. It's been forever since I read the comic book story that this is based on, although I do have all the single issues, and I pulled them out and looked at a couple things just briefly after watching the movie. I forgot going in how that story ended, and so I went into this without the original influencing me too much. I definitely a little bit, but I mean, I didn't even remember who Hush was, you know, at the end of the original comic book story, or if that was, you know, confirmed and revealed or whatever. This movie, though, despite being based on that original comic book story, I think could have been called Batman and Catwoman, and maybe have been more appropriately titled that way. Hush could have been really any villain giving Batman extra trouble. That's how this felt to me. There were a few villains that were featured that made brief appearances. You know, Superman and Lois Lane were also involved early on. So there's lots of things going on in this story, and in the original, it's like it's showcasing Batman's rogues gallery and his, you know, friends and, you know, in the DC universe really well. I mean, there's a lot of who's who going on in that original story, and they captured some of that, but not near to the degree as the original comic. You know, they understandably have to focus in and condense things down in order to make it into a 90-minute, or in this case, closer to an 80-minute experience. So there's lots going on, but it really lacked for me a sense of compelling mystery or character tension. You know, I think it really could have used more noir-style internal monologuing from Batman to let us know what's going on in his mind. What is he thinking about? What is he concerned about? You know, as he's puzzling through this mystery of who is this new player in the field, Hush, that is so freaking dangerous that I've never heard about before, but knows a scary amount about me, you know. I wanted to be let in on Bruce's feelings, and Bruce Wayne and Batman are notoriously unexpressive of their emotions. There's even a joke about that in this story. But what you can do in the comics, and I think even in film too, if you want, is bring us into the character's mind. Even though they don't express their emotions and their feelings and thoughts to other characters, you can still artistically find ways to bring us into the character's mind to show us what they're thinking and feeling. And they didn't give emphasis to that in this story, and it really hurt the experience for me. The original comic book, I do remember this much, had a lot of that internal monologuing, not like thought bubbles, more the stylistic kind of narration bubbles, but it's still that first person, you know, internal monologuing kind of noir vibe to it. And it worked really well for that story, but that they didn't find a way to translate that to this version of the story. It was not only adapted for time, but also, to its detriment, I think, adapted to fit in with this current unified DC animated continuity that they've been building, that's largely based on the New 52 relaunch of the DC universe. For the last, I don't know, few years of DC animated movies, they've been kind of alternating between these one-shot DC movies that aren't connected to a larger continuity, and then these regular DC movies that are constantly building on a single timeline of DC animated movies. There is a scene in this where he briefly talks to Damian Wayne, his son. And I'm just like that. There is no reason for that to be in the story. It certainly wasn't in the original story. It doesn't help this story at all. It's just kind of like reminding you, hey, this movie is part of this ongoing continuity thing. There was no reason to have it in this movie. And there were little bits like that. That was probably the most noticeable one to me, or the most memorable one right now. But there were little bits like that kind of throughout that I was like, you know, those are precious seconds in these movies that I know for budget purposes they cannot make be longer than 90 minutes. Sometimes they're short, like 79, 80 minutes, you know. And so every second is precious, every second counts. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you spending it doing any world building or world confirmation, you know? It's just, you got to be more economical, you know, if you want to tell the most engaging story possible that this story can be. And for my tastes, they weren't using their time as economically as they could for that purpose. Without spoiling the ending, the reveal of Hush's identity is different from who he turns out to be in the comics. And the choice they made with who Hush ended up being in this story really fell flat for me. The person who ends up being Hush doesn't make sense in terms of his body type compared to what we see of Hush throughout this movie, and also lacks any kind of interesting motive, which I thought that the original Hush in the comics did have an interesting motive, a very personal motive, you know, and that was completely lost, and it's just really cookie cutter and boring kind of villain motivation, if you can even say that there is a villain motivation. You might just say, well, their motive is that they're insane, you know. That's probably the best motive I could come up with, you know. There are a few nice character interactions throughout, so even though I don't think the villain was properly motivated, I think that there are some nice character beats and moments between various members of the cast that I think, if you're invested in these characters already, you might appreciate. I got a mild chuckle out of several of them, which is unusual for me, and I think that other fans of the DC Universe will probably find some nice nuggets to enjoy in that regard. There's plenty of action. It never felt slow to me, and early on, when Batman is critically injured by Hush, it was a shocking moment that really established Hush as a looming threat. But after that early scene, the story spent more time establishing and developing this relationship between Batman and Catwoman instead of building up tension about the problem of Hush. And, you know, the relationship between Batman and Catwoman was interesting to me. I kind of wonder if they were exploring this relationship seemingly more than they did in the original comic book story. I don't remember how much they explored it in the original comic story. Certainly percentage-wise, like what percentage of airtime did they give to the relationship between Batman and Catwoman? Certainly it got a greater percentage in this version of the story than in the original Hush story in the comics. But I wonder if they were kind of doing that to kind of fast-track their relationship or do something with their relationship that could then further service a Batman-Catwoman-focused story later, because as I understand it, in recent years, Batman in the comics actually got married to Selina Kyle. I don't think it lasted, I'm not sure, but it was a big deal, their relationship. And so this felt a little bit like they're fast-tracking that relationship and kind of like really playing it up more than the original story did so that they can do something with it in the future. That's speculation on my part, but it did seem like out of place. I'm like, this movie is called Hush, and at the end of the day, I feel really unsatisfied with Hush as a villain, whereas a lot of time was spent developing this Batman-Catwoman relationship, which was interesting to me. You know, it's not that that part of it fell flat. I was just like, why is this the focus? It's interesting stuff, but the movie's called Hush, and so this feels like a diversion from what the purpose arguably should have been for this movie. Regarding the cast and the performances, I thought I thought the casting was really good. I thought all the voice types, you know, really fit the characters. I don't have any complaints there, and a lot of them are returning. You know, you've got Rainn Wilson returning, albeit shortly, as Lex Luthor, and you've got, oh gosh, I can't remember her name. She played Mystique in the older X-Men movies. She's back as Lois Lane, and Jerry O'Connell, I believe, is back as Superman and Clark Kent in this. So a lot of them are carryovers, but you know, I think all the voice casting is really good choices. Although I do think it's strange that the actor playing Batman, whether by his choice or the director's choice, doesn't seem to change his performance style at all when he's acting as Bruce Wayne. I felt something similar about how Clark Kent and Superman were handled in the recent Superman, Death of Superman animated movie. So my guess is that's something going on with the direction, that for some reason they're just not prioritizing that. Don't think that's important, but Batman's secret identity is a major part of this story, and so I would think that they would want to, flesh that out and make it a little bit more believable that people would not know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Anyway, moving on, as far as the visuals go, this continues to represent the high bar set by these DC animated movies that they have maintained for the most part for years. I would have liked a few more frames here and there just to add a little bit of fluidity to the action. There was one brief moment where Nightwing kind of seemingly repeats some frames of a kick, like he kicks a guy twice, and I'm like, oh, they just like reused some frames there. And so, there were just a little bit of things here and there that I was like, oh, I would like maybe a little bit more fluidity, but, the art style, the coloring, the overall quality is still great and really enjoyable to look at. As far as like themes that potentially could lead to worthwhile thought or conversation, on a spiritual level or a moral level, anything along those lines, nothing really jumped out at me in this movie. Maybe there's something in there related to Batman's moral code, which they certainly, bring up a few times, or maybe something about how he and Catwoman are ultimately very different people and how they approach combating or, dealing with evildoers. They approach those things differently, or how people can change. Catwoman has gone through some significant change in her character, but maybe people can only change so much is possibly the message. I don't know. I don't think they were intentionally trying to put any major themes out there to make you think about. And for me, themes stand out best when a story is dramatically engaging, and this one just wasn't, dramatically engaging for me at all. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one. Reread the comic book story, which you're very likely to feature anyway as part of the Essential Issues DC comic book series at youtube.com/christiangeekcentral. This isn't going to be a bad experience for you, but if you watch it, it's also not going to add anything to your life. It's just going to take up some precious time. You can get my spoiler-filled reactions to Batman Hush, the animated movie, in my Spoiler Car video series, just one of many perks available for your support at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. This one's rated PG-13 for violence, action, suggestive material, and language apparently inserted in the story just because they can. That was weird. I don't have a problem with rough language in the entertainment that I watch or listen to or whatever, but I did notice in this movie is like, they just have that person just like, swear or almost swear or whatever just because they can, or are they trying to be adult and edgy, or it's weird. It felt definitely unnecessarily and weirdly inserted. Okay, that's it. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below, and then please like, share, subscribe, click that notification bell if you want to stay connected to this content. I'd also be really grateful for that, or anything you want to do to share this content with other people. And then I hope you'll join us soon, as I'm looking for the button over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing, so I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.